Thanks for tuning into the Crown Chronicles with me, your host, Ashley Nicole, where we have conversations about spirituality, living the human experience, and having the absolute audacity to live as your unapologetic, authentic, hopefully, soulfully aligned self. As we were talking about previously, we're going to continue the conversation of the rise of the sacred feminine. Once again, this is the energy that we're talking about. And yes, it will spill into like women and, men. And then what does it look like in the human form of the energy manifesting and rising? Why is this important? What does it mean for society? And then also how it affects you on like a personal level. And then also breaking down what this exact same transition could look like for you as a person. So we'll take the macro level of sacred feminine energy, but we'll also take it at the micro level, which is a personal experience, and then it just how it transforms into life. And so we previously talked about where it came from, the suppression of the sacred feminine energy, and we talked about like through religion, through patriarchy, and how it's manifested from the beginning, and now what we're seeing. And so what we're seeing in the world, it's that turning of the tables. And it's not even turning from like A to B. It's really just the scales balancing back out. And why is this happening? So when we talked about it before, and we're just going to go over like a cute little blip of it, it's when Abrahamic religions or patriarchy took a hold and they were like, well, we're going to, teach feminine energy. We're going to suppress it. We're going to also teach people to be afraid of it. But what that was inevitably doing was it was taking what could have been sacred masculine energy. And because they're like, well, I'm taking this power away and I'm giving it to myself, essentially you're exhausting yourself. That energy has now become exhausted. And then when you become exhausted, it's kind of like that temper tantrum. And that's when the energy transforms from sacred energy into very wounded energy. There is no good or bad with, masculine, feminine energy. It's when are you exhausting too much of one? You're trying to do the job of all of the above, and yeah, you're going to exhaust it. And when you're exhausted, you think of a toddler having a temper tantrum, they're tired, they need a nap. And that's exactly what's happening. Sacred energy has now turned into wounded energy. And so what we're seeing in the world is that uptick of wounded masculine energy of instead of power, empowerment, it's control. Instead of creation for expression, it's creation for consumption. Instead of allowing people to live in their autonomy, it's, well, I'm going to tell you how to live. And then you're trying to keep tabs on everything. The world is fucking tired. The world is fucking tired. That's why Mama Gaia, she's erupting. You're seeing like hurricanes, tornadoes, tsunamis in places, and you're like, is that how that's supposed to be going right now? Resources, people are saying like resources are limited, and really Mama Gaia is exhausted from the human experience of trying to control all of the things. One way that we see that is in Mother Nature. We already talked about like different world phenomena that are going on. Extreme climate swings. So from hurricanes, there was something that was called an inland hurricane, and I feel like the definition of an hurricane is not inland. So these are just examples of what's happening when sacred energy is then being exhausted and it's not using both sides of the scale. It's completely tipping because it wants to be in control of everything. And so it's tipping because it's exhausted. And that's where the wounded energy is coming from. And so in order to heal wounded energy, you need to reintroduce what was suppressed before and what was hidden and what was, buried. And it needs to bring those scales back into balance. Once again, we're talking about the energy of it, which unfortunately has also developed into the suppression of the woman physically. And again, we're talking on an elevated level. I'm not in a space of like men are better, women are better. Everybody holds a place in this lifetime. And it's not just necessarily men are better, women are better, like I prefer this. It just is what it is. It's the acceptance of life is life. This is it. And that's what we go with. But unfortunately, that acceptance has not always happened. And that's how we end up in shit like this. Okay, so let's reel it back. Why is sacred feminine energy now coming back on the rise? Well, it's an awakening. And so anytime an entity, an energy, a vessel, a being, a person is powerful, and maybe that energy does not realize its power, or it is empowered and actually living in their power, other outside views or sources will try to create a fear around it, disempower it, and take from it. And so the reason why we see that now, and I'll break it down on a personal level too, so how people experience it in their spiritual awakenings and then how you see it in society. So women historically had been empowered, and feminine energy was beautifully flourishing in the world. However, part of feminine energy is it's the magic. It's the kind of like quantum physics. You can't exactly explain it and you can't prove it, but it just is. And then, when masculine energy came online, they're like, they're able to do things, but it can't be proven. And so now I want to be able to do that, and I physically can do it. So I'm now going to take that power and put it into patriarchy, consumerism, all of the things. So what does that mean? So the womb is literally a portal of sacred feminine energy. It is a direct channel to the divine. You can't explain the divine. It's a feeling, it's a knowing, it's where all 7 of the clairs live. So the psychic gifts, so claircognizance, clairvoyance, clairaudience, clairgustance, which is the stomach, clairtangency, so that's touching. It's all of the clairs, but you can't really explain it. And so what was happening was, and that's empowerment. I can't explain it, it just is. It's the simply being and acceptance of life. It simply is. I'm not going to prove anything. And so what hypermasculinity, aka wounded masculine energy, did was, well, that can't be explained, so I'm going to take it now and say, well, I can explain it and I can prove it through me being in control. I can control it, and now I have eyes on everything, which honestly took the magic out of life and stuff. So let's go back historically. Sacred feminine energy was like, it was the herbalism. So it was using Mama Gaia's resources through respect, through veneration of the ancestral knowledge and wisdom, and that's simply from living life. It's through being able to, take energy and move it through a vessel and that was through empowerment. It's self-empowerment and knowing that there's no difference or separation from the divinity of universal source and the human. It was always one. And what ended up happening was religion was created, and now you need to either go through a priest or you need to go through some sort of either the church or a third party to essentially ask for approval to connect with the divine. And so the relationship from self with the divine was now diminished. There was a third party that was interjected in there. And it started taking away from people really knowing and feeling and being empowered in their own being. Okay, great. So why does this happen? Like I said again, when something or someone is very much so an empowered being simply for living, just knowing that that's who they are and not needing permission to be that being, it's either intimidating or it's not something that is really approved of. And so the way that we see it, that's on the macro level. So let's break it down to how people could experience this and what this means on your spiritual journey. So your black sheeps of the family, your HSPs, highly sensitive people, indigo children, you have star seeds, you have the energetic leaders of the world. A lot of the time, most of the time, a good portion of the time, they are born into situations to where they are taught to fear themselves. They're taught to hide themselves. They're taught that they're bad, or the core beliefs of it. And it's typically a spiritual awakening also has connotations in like correlation with mental illness or in psychology. Correlation, not causation. They are one and the same. You cannot have one without the other. And so the way that you see this personally is when you're in a family, and let's say a child, because your spiritual gifts online, you're born with them. You are pure soul frequency as you come out the womb. And so your spiritual gifts come online, and let's say, I don't know, here's a beautiful personal example. You're born into a family, and you know, kids have perfect sense. They're clear feeling, so clairsentience, they know it. They also have the claircognizance and the clairvoyance online. And so when a child may approach their family and say like, oh, I see Uncle Michael from over here, and the family's like, that man has been dead for 37 years. How the hell do you see him? Or they're like, I feel X, Y, and Z. Or another huge one, and you see this a lot with the wounded empath and HSPs before they have their awakening, is extreme sensitivity. Whether it's they notice a tonal difference in someone's interaction with them, if they feel sadness, it's like the world is ending. If it's joy, that excitement, like it's almost like that being walks into a room and then the lights just start flickering. And they're told they're too sensitive. You're too sensitive, you're reacting too much. And what you're teaching that being is, oh, I have to hide myself. I'm too much over here. But on the same token is I'm too much because I feel too much. And I'm also not enough because I don't fit in this box that the world, society, my family, the church, school, friends want me to fit in. And so people don't consciously, hopefully, don't consciously try to suppress this, but it's part of that life path and that soul's journey is your gifts are hidden from you. Your power is hidden from you. It is, Carl Jung said it, and it's a beautiful way of seeing this. We know that there is the shadow. There's a shadow realm. There's our shadows that we need to integrate. And, part of your wholeness and part of individuation is seeing your shadows and really, I accept you, I embrace you, I love you. And, we either change them or they just live with us. But underneath that, he also mentioned the golden shadow, which is when you're told your sensitivity or your creativity is a huge one that's suppressed in kids. It's like, oh, your imagination's too wild. And they're told to hide that. Their creativity is one. We talked about sensitivity is one. What are other gifts that are insane? Telepathy and like psychic gifts, those are another one. And so those become the golden shadow because what happens is they are then suppressed and buried, just like the sacred feminine. But the difference is that golden shadow, it's your deepest shadow, the deepest part of you. It's your soul alignment, it's your soul gifts. And so it's the deepest shadow that's buried. But what's happening as you're moving through life and all of the masks are being put on you, as all of the darkness, you're experiencing all of the darkness, as all of the isms in the world are being, put on you and what you should be and how you should be and the shoulda, coulda, wouldas essentially. That golden shadow is actually, it's being essentially grown. It's alchemizing underneath all of the other shadows. And so here's an example. I was always told I was too sensitive. I remember I was at an all-girls Catholic boarding school in England. And there's something about the energy so this was in Effingham. There's something about the energy and everything. I was a little Black girl from America that spoke German, English, and French at this time. And I was just a weird ass anomaly. But there's something about the energy where I was at. I don't know if it was because it was religion. I don't know if it was because of the place, because my energy will change with like different location. I was extremely sensitive to energy. And we had a religious education class, and a girl said something about me, and it was like the end of my world. And I didn't know why I was feeling, it was almost like, so when energy hits my chest, it's either a huge expansion or it's like a sinking. And even at 11 years old, I noticed this is what happened. And so like I'm crying, and one of the head teachers, my homeroom teacher, she pulled me into the hallway and she told me, she's like, you are way too sensitive. Just it happens. Like people, kids are just kids and that's it. And so I remember this moment distinctly. I was like, oh, I'm too sensitive. It's my fault that they said this mean thing about me. So I'm bad. I'm too much, but I'm also not enough at the same time. So I'm being ripped apart essentially. I'm not enough, but I'm also too much because I don't fit this mold of what's socially acceptable. And I think it was something about my hair. Um, and it ripped me apart. And that was one of the very pivotal moments where I was like, I have to hide myself because I'm not socially safe. And then I started realizing, well, I didn't realize this then as an adult, like 30 plus years, 28 years, whatever, it doesn't matter. Later, I started realizing that's when I started really hiding from myself because I was like, okay, well, my hair is not acceptable, so I'm physically not acceptable. My energy is too much, and so I'm so sensitive that I have to like eat the in like massive amounts of energy that I had. And what that transformed into was it turned into rage for me. And it was just outpouring of rage, just irrational outpouring of rage. And so then I didn't know why I was so angry. So now I'm like, well, now I'm scared of myself. So I'm too much, I'm not enough. I have to hide myself physically, emotionally, and energetically. I'm way too explosive, but now I'm also scared of myself. So I just did not belong. And so what I was doing is I was pushing myself into fear response. So, okay, how does this pertain to what we're talking about right now? And so, on a personal level, when a person is a very powerful being, they are meant to be a divine leader, an energetic leader, or in whatever capacity that they're meant to change the world, other people pick up on it first. And in my case, I didn't know. Due to like family circumstances, life was happening. I had no tie to my origins. So like family origins, no tie to it. I was living in a country that I didn't belong in, not didn't belong in, but I wasn't born in. And so at this point, I knew nothing of who the fuck I was, along with I had no connection with myself. And so there's no such thing as self-hatred. It's how disconnected are you from your soul? No person ever hates themselves. It's how disconnected are you from your authentic self. And so what happens is society or other people around them are essentially like, well, that's a powerful being. And we're just gonna, and the more disconnected you are from your soul essence, the easier you are to be molded. I hate saying people are controlled, but like, that's kind of what it is. So, okay, let's bring it from personal level and, kids being told they're too much or they should hide from themselves or they're not enough or I'm bad or they're scared of themselves, to now let's bring it back to the sacred feminine energy on a macro level. What this means is when the sacred feminine energy was really balanced in the world, what was happening was, wounded masculine energy was kind of peeking in and saying like, oh, they can heal themselves. They don't need to outsource anything. They can live autonomously. Their body is the portal. Well, let's create fear around this. And then let's also say, like, oh, this is one. I think every woman on earth has been told she's crazy. And yes, minus actual mental illness and need for extremes. It's, you're crazy. You're too much. Well, you can't prove it to me, so I'm going to give you the outlet for it. In comes religion. And what we perceive as the manipulation and what we see is like, oh, this is wrong that this is happening to this person or this set of people or this group of people is all part of that soul contract for their awakening. It's for that person or that group to remember who the fuck they are. You see this all the time in racism also. First of all, the concept of race, that was a man-made concept. Once again, how you have seen it sewn throughout, it's when I need to create an element of control, I am going to create also the essentially the structure of that control. So that soul contract, it sounds crazy. And unless you've gone through a spiritual awakening yourself, you're like, that's kind of insane. But on an energetic level and on that spiritual and actually consciousness level, it is that person or that group of people had either known who they were or they were just unapologetically living as they were. And then part of that soul contract was, okay, you're going to have to remember who you actually are in your soul essence. So then now, like we were talking about that golden shadow, as that's percolating and it's growing and it's maturing and it's alchemizing, now you're not going back to the same level of soul frequency that you were. You have now elevated because you have now empowered yourself through the removal of all of the masks, all of the societal expectations, all of the boxes that you were put in and that you upheld because it was given to you. And it's almost a I remember when I first started my spiritual awakening, and a lot of people going through their spiritual awakenings are like, why the fuck is this happening to me? And one of the greatest awakenings on that journey, and it's on an individual once again and a collective level, is the ability and the skill and the full on power to say, you know what? X, Y, and Z may have happened. And yes, it's not may have happened. It's not in the questioning sense of may have happened, but like I'm going to take that this has happened along with, I'm not putting my energy into that anymore. Because where your energy goes, where your attention goes, that's where you're giving your power to. And so in that soul contract of, let's say, sacred feminine energy, is to remember sacred feminine power. And it's a hard fucking feat when a power or an energy is rising and remembering back to who it, originally was, the original divine blueprint, because we sound crazy as shit. Because we're like, you know what? A spiritual awakening and a collective like ego death starts with there's the anger first, the uproar and the anger. And it's just like, why the fuck is this happening to me? And then it becomes the anger of like, this shit's fucked. Like, this shit is actually fucked. And again, on society, you see the outpour of people that are like, no, women's empowerment. And we're going, and that's the motivation we need. That's the energy we need. But where is it being directed? And that's also what you do on a spiritual awakening on a personal level. You say, well, what the fuck? This person's abuse is fucked. I don't like it. It wasn't fair to me. And I'm not going to let that create who I am anymore. I'm tired of wearing the shit that they gave me because they're a fucked individual, but I'm not wearing that shit anymore. So now my curiosity has then developed into anger and rage, and now that curiosity is also like, okay, well, I'm not doing this shit anymore. So what do I do? And that's where that disconnect starts happening, and we're like, there has to be another way. There has to be another way. And again, on a personal and on a collective level, that spiritual awakening happens. I think it was Jim Carrey that said it. Depression is really your soul saying, I'm tired of wearing this avatar suit and pretending that I'm okay with this mediocre or this like spoon fed to me life. What am I going to do about it? And unfortunately, yes, depression comes also because it's like, well, I need to do something, but I don't know what to do because I'm honestly knowing that this isn't who I am. So if I don't know who I am, how do I take my power back? How do I get to what I know is correct and what I feel in my gut, in my heart, in my soul, in my entire being is correct if I don't even know who the fuck I am, but I know that this shit isn't working? And that's what we're seeing on the collective feminine level. And at that same time, you'll also start getting that resistance. And that's, again, circling back to the beginning of this conversation this week, is why we see that uptick in wounded energy. Not just wounded masculine energy, it's just wounded energy, period. Because then we have like the damsels in distress, or we have like the hyper controlling feminine energy also, along with wounded masculine energy of I need the control. and I'm going to put you back in your place, or I'm going to, give you that resistance. So you really think that this is the truth of it. And I think what we're feeling now in society is people are like, genuinely, it's a collective. No, I know there's some resistance, but y'all have me really fucked up. And I'm gonna keep going. And like, you're gonna be crazy over here, and that's okay. I'm still gonna keep going. And that, once again, is that persistent, and it is the continuous drive of the energy that is rising. And so we talked about on the societal and the collective level. So on the individual level, this happens also in that spiritual awakening. It's the resistance when the ego, or this part of the ego, is like, well, I'm going to be replaced, or I'm going to die. And it's not that. I personally do not believe in ego deaths. It is ego evolution, and it's time for the ego to grow the fuck up and relinquish the reins. You're not driving the bus anymore. And it's the turning from the ego driving and controlling everything now to being heart centered, which is soul frequency. It is divine and sacred frequency. And when that happens in a spiritual awakening for someone, that's when you start getting that resistance, and you're like, okay, well, I'm going to make a decision to better my life. And then all the old patterns start coming up, or you start feeling like you're almost at tug of war in the world. And it's at that threshold where you keep going. You don't fight, but you know in your mind, no, I'm not a victim of this shit anymore. I'm not going to let it determine or tell me who the fuck I am, or what I need to be, or where I need to fall in line. I'm going to keep going. And that's what we see once again on the individual level, collective level, and then complete just worldly level. And I know it's not going to complete in my lifetime, not this lifetime of mine. It's not going to complete in this lifetime of mine. However, I do know, with the rise of this energy, and because the sacred feminine once again does lead in the energetic, the sacred masculine will come online at some point, and it'll start leading in the physical the exact same way. And that's where those scales will start balancing. And it's cohesion, it is inclusion, it is the acceptance of everybody as who the fuck they are, while also having that grace and the compassion and the understanding, and bringing that back into the world of like, you be who the fuck you need to be. That has no effect on who I'm going to be. And if it tries to have an effect on who I'm going to be, I simply rise even higher into my power. That's what I feel is happening. And that's what I'm seeing is happening. But it's also, I'm seeing is happening on the collective level. And it's also what happens on the individual level. Whether I see it in clients, whether I've lived through it also. It's when you come to those points of that increase in resistance energy, you keep going. But you take that anger, or that sadness, or that just like side eye energy, and you say, no, I'm going to keep going. I deserve better, and I'm going to do, experience, know better. And that's where the evolution comes from. And it's beautiful at the end. But in order for things to be created, the old paradigms, ideologies, and understandings must crumble. And that's where you bring in the beautiful goddess of Kali Ma, who she is the goddess of destruction and the divine mother. But that's what is happening with the sacred feminine. Next week, we'll talk about how it manifests in women and men, because obviously we're going to experience it very differently. We're anatomically different, but then, world, society, experiences of each individual is going to be different too. And so how it manifests in in the genders, we'll say the genders. Thank you for tuning in. I appreciate all of the just support that I've gotten. I know sometimes when we're talking about spirituality and energy and then the human experience, sometimes we're like, where do I go with all this? And so this is a place where I love to curate and just have open conversation. I don't know everything, but I do know energy, and things change all the time. And so when we're contributing and we're having the conversations, it's the energies going into what I really want to curate as a progressive and moving forward energy, and an expansive energy, instead of staying stuck in something or like a previous victim mindset. And shit, I've done that. And how can we use that energy that we curate all together for our own, essentially coming home to ourselves? This is that space, and that's what I want to create that with everyone that does interact. I appreciate you. Have a beautiful week, and I'll see you on the next episode.